for her and former Senator McPeak, who really is critical in moving this discussion statewide. This task force have a real opportunity to address the digital divide. Many of you know that this is not new, but this took on a whole new urgency because of COVID-19. There is so much work still to be done. And as I told many San Diegans and told my board before, it is time that we truly move forward with a system that serves everybody, regardless of where you live, what zip code you live in, regardless of the color of your skin, regardless of your ethnic background. And being a professor, an adjunct professor for many years and teaching kids whose, their parents did everything and put every penny they have to send them to that school. Teaching for 6 years taught me something, that we as leaders in our respective areas, regardless of where you work, you are leading in certain aspects. And as leaders, you have to always do what you can in your sphere of leadership. Imagine this. Imagine if 40% of our kids who are learning virtually don't have the right broadband or the right Wi-Fi. What are we doing? We're denying our future the opportunity to learn. So digital divide is not just about speaking about divide, it's about truly understanding that the future of our region depends on us educating our kids, giving access to opportunity. And we do this in transportation. We told the San Diegans that we're going to build you, we're going to reimagine the future of transportation system. We're going to build you a faster, fairer, and clearer transportation system. We're going to get into technology and future mobility. And that's no difference. When working from home becomes a commonplace, we depend on our ability to connect. And unfortunately, there is very high percentage who don't have that opportunity. I think SANDAG has an opportunity and an obligation to, with your help as partners and stakeholders, to partner with the private sector to absolutely build the future smart cities that we're after. We are going to ask all of us to roll up our sleeves and get to work. And for whatever reason, remember, this work is not just about having a better speed to load files and movies. It is truly about a basic connection. So we don't deny a whole segment of population the abilities to access opportunities. And not just for the environment and the economy, but as human beings, we need to pay attention to this. So I commit to you from SANDAG's standpoint, as you know, we're putting, I have Antoinette and Jack here who are amazing, who's been working on this. We're going to continue to put resources toward this work. And our hope is, with the help of former Secretary McPeak and others, that the state of California will put money on the table like they do for transportation for this digital divide. And we're going to be able to measure ourselves as we move forward. So no, this is serious business. When Antoinette and Jack told me, would you do an opening remark, I was eager to come here to tell you this is something I feel very strongly about, like I feel about social equity. And this is big, huge part of social equity. People knew that we have a divide, but they really never want to admit it. And now the COVID-19 said, well, we have a divide, we can't deny it. And even with that, people try to say, well, we'll give somebody a tablet and we'll take, this is more than that. So my commitment to you, is we're going to work as hard as humanly possible to make this as important as putting a future transportation system for San Diegans. People ask me, a reporter asked me, said, so what are you doing? And that was last year. And I said, I'm allowing San Diegans to dream. And I want them to dream in such a way that if that dream not become a reality, they have to blame somebody, me and whoever they want to blame. So let us dream about a time when we overcome the social divide, social justice in this region. I appreciate you as partners and stakeholders. I appreciate my team, Antoinette and Jack, but you have my commitment to this. I'll do whatever it takes. I will spare no expenses in making sure that we take this seriously. So thank you for allowing me to be speaking for a few minutes. And I wish you well as members of this task force in moving forward on solving the San Diego's digital divide. And frankly, as I always say, we want the best transportation system in the world, but we also want the best seamless digital connection between our residents, the 3.4 million of them. So thank you very much for having me for a few minutes.
Thank you, Hassan, for the inspiration, and thank you for making this a priority for Sandag and giving me the opportunity to work on it and bring this group together. So if you want to switch to the next slide, James. So just a couple of housekeeping items. We are a big group, so if you don't mind muting yourself when you're not speaking, of course, we like to see everyone, so feel free to keep your cameras on. We're going to use the chat for comments and questions outside of the open discussion. And we have two members of the Sandag team that'll be monitoring the chat. Sanjeev, who is our entrepreneur in residence and a strategic advisor on this project. And then Jack Christensen from our government affairs team will be monitoring the chat and responding to questions. There is a slight change to the agenda, so I've added it to this slide. We're going to do a quick round robin introductions for members of the task force. I'm going to do a very quick overview of why we're here and why Sandag is getting involved in this subject. And then we'll have a discussion about the research and data collection component of the strategy is what we're really focused on right now. Then we are very fortunate to have a digital divide research fellow on our team for about 6 months, Amy. And Amy's going to share some of the highlights from the recently released California Broadband Action Plan. We have 2 members from our government affairs team that will give an update on state and federal legislative activities related to the digital divide and broadband expansion. And then Sanjeev is going to talk about some funding that was recently awarded to the region by the FCC for broadband expansion. And then we'll talk about next steps and the next meeting. If you could also use your hand, do the raise hand feature to speak during the discussion so that we're not talking over each other. And again, Jack and Sanjeev will help to monitor the raised hands and call in folks to talk. Any questions from anyone before we move on to introductions? Okay, hearing none. Next slide, please. So I think the most efficient way to do introductions here is if everyone could be really brief. I'm going to go through the roster actually, and we'll just start from the top of the roster and I'll call on organizations. And if you represent that organization, if you could say your name, provide a brief description of the work that you're doing related to the digital divide or your interest in the digital divide. And then in the chat, if you wouldn't mind typing one thing that you hope this task force will accomplish. So use the chat feature for that, but when I call on your organization, please unmute yourself. And if you feel comfortable turning your camera on, that's great for your introduction. So we'll start at the top with the Anza-Borrego Desert Research Center. Elaine, I think I saw you here. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning. Yes, thank you so very much for allowing me to be part of this task force in bringing the internet to our rural areas of the county. And we are located in the donut hole of the largest state park in the lower 48. So even though we're an hour away from, say, Ramona, or other major cities, we definitely feel that remoteness based on the park pretty much, I don't want to say stopping internet broadband coming through, but it definitely puts more hurdles to come through. And so being part of the research center, I'm also part of the infrastructure subcommittee of Borrego revitalization, and that's part of our focus as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Elaine. Next up is AT&T. I'm not sure if Christine is here yet. She let me know she'd be late.
Hi there. Yes, Christine Moore here, Executive Director of External Affairs for AT&T for San Diego and Imperial Counties. I'm only calling in by phone, so unfortunately I can't chat or see what's on the screen, but I did want to check in, handle community affairs, legislative analysis, and partnering with community organizations. This digital divide issue is very important to us, and we've done some great work here in the city. We would love to hear more about what's happening regionally and how we can help. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine. CETF, the California Emerging Technology Fund. Debbie, are you with us?
Yes, good morning. Hi, my name is Debbie Shire. I'm with California Emerging Technology Fund. I work with Sunny McPeak, and we're looking forward to help supporting your task force in any way we can.
Excellent, thank you. Next up is Caltrans. I think we have a couple of representatives from Caltrans on the call. Al Jaffrey, Chris, or Elizabeth.
Yeah, this is Al Jaffrey. I'm with Caltrans. I'm the District 11 Broadband Coordinator, and I'm hoping to help in any way we can facilitate the broadband providers to provide the services to underserved communities, or any other endeavor that would help in that endeavor. Thank you.
Wonderful. Any other Caltrans reps that want to introduce themselves?
Yeah, hi guys, Chris Schmidt also from District 11 here in San Diego. I'm currently the right-of-way deputy for the district, so lots of challenges, of course, with middle mile and local connectivity with right-of-way. So my hope is to bring my expertise as the former statewide Caltrans broadband coordinator to this topic. Have worked quite a bit with CETF and others around the state on this issue, so hope to bring that here to the region and share some of my experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris and Al Jaffrey. Next up, Charter Communications. Felipe, are you with us?
I'm here. Good morning, everyone. Felipe Monroy with Charter Communications. You may know our brand Spectrum. We're an ISP provider in parts of the county of San Diego, and looking forward to participating in this task force over the next few months and how we can move the ball forward, as it were.
Wonderful. Happy to have you. Next up, Chula Vista Elementary School District. I think I saw you here, Danny.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Danny Pessoan, Director of IT at Chula Vista Elementary School District. Everything under our IT, 49 schools, 30,000 students. And the most important thing is to make sure that it's seamless. The technology is seamless. Also with efficacy, efficiency, security, and most of all, safety for our kids.
Danny, I can only imagine how busy you are right now. So thank you for, for being a part of this.
We're all in it together. We'll get through it.
We will. That's right.
So much.
City of Carlsbad. I think I saw my friend David.
Hi, everybody. David Graham, Chief Innovation Officer for the City of Carlsbad, and also work together with a number of the cities that are here, Port Airport on the Regional Smart Cities Alliance convened by Cleantech San Diego. Carlsbad does have the fortune of being generally a very solvent city, but we have major infrastructure issues when it relates to connectivity, and we still have vulnerable populations that need support, particularly with the growing senior population. We're currently in the middle of doing an age-friendly Carlsbad initiative, which is identifying gaps in both connectivity and services for our vulnerable population. So very excited to be participating here, and great to see many friends.
Thank you, David. City of San Diego representatives, is Kirby and Sarah on the meeting yet?
Yeah, so good morning. This is Kirby, Chief Innovation Officer for the City of San Diego. Very excited to be here and work with you all. We, just like a lot of you, are trying to figure out the best way to address the gaps in connectivity for some of our populations, especially coming out of the pandemic, hopefully making sure that we're stronger than we were going into it. So a lot of initiatives around programming, how we kind of not only focus on the divide, but also provide equity as well as we sort of think through some of the opportunities here. So again, happy to be here and thank you for having us.
And hi, this is Sarah Moga Alamani. I work on Kirby's team with the mayor's office. I am the back to work coordinator, and this is something that came up when we put together the back to work plan during the campaign. So thanks for having me here, and I'm happy to be listening and learning.
Thank you, Sarah. Next up is the city of Chula Vista. I think Dennis is on the line.
Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. Good to see everyone. Dennis Kakunga, Chief Sustainability Officer. So we've been working on digital equity and inclusion in our city for about 2 years now. We adopted our digital equity and inclusion plan in May of 2016. Sorry, May of last year. And so we're in the process of the implementation, and some of our objectives is how to champion regional collaboration. So we're very excited to be able to be a part of this task force so that we can work together collaboratively on this.
Thank you, Dennis. The work that you've done in Chula Vista is really impressive, and we'll learn a lot from you. Next up, Clean Tech is Jason with us.
I am. Hi, Antoinette.
Hey, Jason.
Good morning, everyone. Jason Anderson with Clean Tech San Diego. Always happy to follow Dennis and David. As David mentioned, we've been working on the Smart Cities Collaborative for a number of years, and most recently identified, not most recently, but have identified the digital divide as a significant issue for the region. So happy that Antoinette is now fully engaged in this, and that Sandag's fully engaged in it. We've been working with Cisco on developing a regional roadmap around the digital divide. So I'm hoping that we can take some of the lessons learned from Cisco and bring that team into this project as well. So thanks for doing this, Annette. Antoinette, I think it's obviously extremely important, and happy to be a part of it.
Thanks, Jason. Next up is the Communications Workers of America. Do we have Bianca or a member of her team on the line?
Yes, Sal Espinoza representing CWA. We are a labor union. We represent telecom workers. We have 2,000 essential workers here in the county that have worked diligently, that have not stopped since the pandemic started. And our line of sight is we actually see infrastructure, we actually lay hands on it. And what we want is equitable build out. And I love how the gentleman at the beginning said, tablets are not enough. We need to build out infrastructure so we're on the right path. Anything we can do to help and lift this organization and this collaboration, we will bring it. So thank you guys, looking forward.
Thank you, Sal. Do we have anyone from the County of San Diego joining us yet? Okay, next up is Cox Communications. I think I saw Carla.
Hello, yes, Antoinette. Good morning, everyone. I'm Carla with Cox Communications. Very excited to continue the collaboration and build upon the programs we've established with Connect to Compete and so forth, and really hoping to highlight some of the gaps and where we can step up further as an ISP provider. So thank you again for coordinating this.
Excellent. Adrian from County. Go ahead.
This is Nerea Tossin with the County of San Diego.
Sorry, oh, hi, Nerea. I thought I saw you. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes,
so glad you're
Tossin
here.
Thank you. With the Office of Strategy and Intergovernmental Affairs with the County of San Diego. We recently, actually yesterday, passed with our new board, our new legislative platform, which definitely puts a strong lens on trying to address the gaps and needs with the digital divide in our region, along with incorporating a lot of those aspects of equity and inclusion with our county services. I'm happy to be here and happy to represent the Office of Strategy and Intergovernmental Affairs. Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have Adrian from Crown Castle?
Yeah, I'm here. Good morning, everyone. Adrian Salas, Government Affairs Manager for Crown Castle. We are a shared communications infrastructure developer. We design, engineer, construct, own, and operate fiber networks across the country, and certainly here in San Diego. We finally have an office in San Diego as of 2019. Very happy to be a part of this task force and looking forward to working with all of you. Thanks.
Thank you. IBEW, Hector.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Hector Murrieta. I'm representing IBEW, Local 569 out of San Diego. We are also a labor union with nearly 4,000 essential workers that also have stopped working during this whole pandemic. If anything, we've actually been busier, and this is exactly why. A lot of needs got brought up to light, this being one of them. So we're here to provide labor, skilled individuals, and just help out with anything we can, whether it's physically or just any input. I personally have 11 years of experience installing what we probably will have to do here, fiber optics and copper, to get bridge this divide. So just happy to be here and help out with whatever we can. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. We're happy you're here. Medafra Enterprises, Jim or Jeremy?
Good morning. I am Jeremy Ogle, Public Affairs Director for Medafra Enterprises. We're a San Diego-based consulting firm working with a number of clients on smart city and digital equity issues in the public sector, private sector, and nonprofits. See quite a few friends and clients and former clients on the line this morning. And I'm grateful to be here and offer whatever we can.
Thanks, Jeremy. Jeff from Media 3. Don't think Jeff has joined us. So Nishal from MoHuman. Okay. We have National Association of Regional Councils, either Macy or Jessica.
Hi, my name is Jessica Routson, and I'm a program assistant at NARC. Yes, our acronym is NARC. We represent metropolitan planning organizations, regional councils, and councils of government all over the country. We actually have 11 members in California. SANDAG is one of them. SCAG is another one, if you're familiar. And we're just really excited to be a part of this task force. And this is very important to our members and to us. And any way we can offer support or research or any resources, we'd be happy to do so. So thank you guys for letting us join.
Thank you, Jessica. Oh, Jeff, it looks like your technical difficulties were resolved. Yeah. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Jeff Aber. I'm with the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. I'm a communications coordinator managing the sheriff's, what most people would call the 911 center. So for all of sheriff's jurisdiction, all of the calls for public safety services come into our center with our dispatchers answering those calls. Also, we're responsible for communicating with the public in regards to alert and warning for emergency situations, evacuations, and other emergency information to help keep the public safe. So hopefully I'm able to contribute something from our end and our expertise as it pertains to the public's ability to access public services, public safety services as they need.
Thank you, Jeff. Public safety is a really important aspect of the digital divide and definitely something we want to address in our strategy. So I'm glad you're able to be here. I don't think Erin's on the call yet from San Diego for Every Child. She's going to be joining late. Michelle, are you with us from San Diego Foundation?
I'm here.
Oh, you made it. Wonderful.
This is Erin. Hello. Yes, I was able to make it. I don't have camera, but I'm so sorry. Do you want just as a quick intro? So Erin Hogeboom, I'm director of San Diego for Every Child. So we are a initiative that outside of COVID time, well, and during, focuses on tackling the experience of childhood poverty. And so we look at things like the intersection between housing and hunger relief, childcare and healthcare. During COVID, we actually set up the COVID-19 Children's Fund, which focused on 3 areas, which we heard from the community were going to be the main priority focus areas for during COVID, which were food security, childcare, and then equitable distance learning. And so that's how we really got involved in the digital equity space, is looking at the intersection of kind of distance learning at this time and how, and the necessity of digital equity. So that's a little bit of background on what we do. And then I will add in the chat what I hope we accomplish with this task force.
Thank you. San Diego Foundation, do we have anyone with us? Not yet. Okay, the San Diego Futures Foundation. I know I saw Stephanie.
Stephanie Youngerson, San Diego Futures Foundation. Glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Gary Knight is the executive director, is probably going to give the intro to the organization.
Okay, great. I didn't see Gary yet, so.
Gary Knight, Executive Director for the San Diego Futures Foundation. Quickly, we're a comprehensive digital equity partner that's been working for the last 20 years on this subject, and we see a number of our partners and collaborators over the years on the call, so it's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Addie, did you join us yet from the San Diego Public Library? Addie had a meeting, so she's probably going to be late. San Diego Regional Economic Development Corporation. Caitlin, are you with us?
Hi, this is Caitlin. It's great to hear you today, Antoinette. I'm sorry I couldn't make it via video. EDC is super excited to be joining you guys on this initiative. This is very aligned with our inclusive growth work. This is also a personal project that is exciting to me. I previously worked on an initiative very similar to this in Baltimore City, and it came out with wonderful results. So this is going to be a very exciting project for us to take on, and we're excited to work with each of you. Thank you.
Excellent. Charlene, are you with us from the Social Services Transportation Advisory Council? Okay, I don't see Charlene. Barry, you're representing two organizations today, actually. You're representing Sandag Social Equity Working Group and the Urban Collaborative Project. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I will, and thank you. And it's good to be at the table, you guys. The Urban Collaborative Project, we focus on underserved areas in the Southeast San Diego area, and we deal with disparities ranging from health, safety, infrastructure, and part of that role I play is being one of the CBOs to provide outreach into those above mentioned communities. And so what I'm excited about here is I love the process. I love the fact that we've got a bunch of subject matters. We've got a lot of nonprofit organizations. We've got a bunch of suppliers. I'd love to see more community members involved in this. My mantra is going to be red-lined areas in urban communities. And so I want you to know that that's going to be my primary focus, starting from infrastructure with fiber optics to what someone mentioned, that it isn't the solution to the problem, but certainly a piece, is training at the back end of this process. So I'm going to be spending a lot of time representing the community as I see it, you guys, looking at those kind of areas. It's very broad, again, starting with infrastructure and working our way to the actual implementation of different services, such as specifically as tablets and Zoom classes and those kind of things. So I'm just delighted to be here. And thank you all for wanting to finally address a decades-old systematic problem. So it's good to be here. Thank you, Antoinette, for putting this together.
You bet, Barry. It's always good to have you. Next up, I didn't see Adam. Is anybody representing the Tribal Technical Working Group or the SCTCA today? I don't think so. Okay, Ramesh from the UC San Diego Qualcomm Institute. Don't see Ramesh. I know that we don't have David Reed here from the University of Colorado today. And then it looks like last up is Verizon. Shahryar, I know you're here.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. This is Shahryar Afshar with Verizon. I spent 25 years with the city and port, so being part of a public conversation is always something that's been very personally important to me. And I think Sandag pulling this diverse group together is really unique. As Barry said, and we still miss some people, some community members, I'm sure we'll include them in the conversation, but I really look forward to being a part of this conversation and contributing whatever we can to a topic that comes up for us as one carrier in the region all the time. So very interested in what the definition looks like, how to put structures around it, and how to actually implement something, because 2021 is going to be a tough year for this region across the country. So whatever we can do to help our region recover, the sooner the better. So thank you.
Hey, Antoinette, can I take 10 seconds and do a quick intro for David Reed?
Sure.
So David Reed is, he's been collaborating with us, and he's an academic at University of Colorado. He's scholar in residence. And he's previously worked at Cable Labs, where DOCSIS was specified, and he's worked at the FCC as a policy advisor, and has published book on fiber optic deployment and so on. So he's a great expert who's offered to help us on the task force, and we're really glad to have him join us. He could not join today because
he's teaching.
He's teaching a class at the university. So this slot on Thursdays just doesn't work for him, but he's been a great help for us putting together what we have so far. Thanks.
Thank you. And I think I saw Michelle join late. Michelle, are you here from the foundation?
Yes, hello everyone. So nice to be here. Michelle Jaramillo from the San Diego Foundation, Director of Education Initiatives at the San Diego Foundation. Really glad to be with you all today discussing this incredibly important topic. Obviously, I come at this issue from the education lens and the deep and considerable impacts that connectivity has on education and learning, particularly, but not exclusively, but particularly in the circumstances that we find ourselves in around distance learning models.
Thank you, Michelle. I know there are a lot of other folks that have joined today to listen in, and I don't think we have time to go through introductions of everyone here. In terms of the SANDAG team, with me today, I already introduced you to Sanjeev Nanda, our entrepreneur in residence and strategic advisor on this project. James Jimenez, our wonderful intern, is going to be kind of driving the PowerPoint today and helping to host the meeting. Jack Christensen is our government affairs liaison to this project and is also helping with the chat and hands raised. So with that, I want to just dive right in. We have a lot to cover and to talk about today. So James, if you don't mind switching to the next slide, please.
So Antoinette, if I may, before you.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
So I stayed and listened to the amazing statements from all of our partner stakeholders. I'm really pleased. Let us just make this followed by actions. And especially our partners from the private sector, we're more than willing to partner with you. Antoinette, Sanjeev, and Jack are ready to go to any length. But I hope in a year when we meet, we can talk about tangible things we did to connect our community. But I'm so grateful for what I heard. Thank you for doing this. I'm gonna sign off.
Thanks, Hassan.
Bye-bye.
I see members that are joining a little bit late. If you don't mind, just in the chat introducing yourself, and then a reminder to everyone, please make one comment about something you hope that this group will achieve, and we'll compile all that feedback and make sure it's captured in the meeting notes that we sent out after the meeting. So I know that everyone here already knows that broadband is really an essential utility, and especially during the last year. But I've gotten asked a lot of questions lately about why SANDAG is getting involved in the digital divide. What does it have to do with transportation and regional planning? And the answer is really simple. I think we've all touched on that already. Broadband connectivity is critical to so many regional issues, whether it's economic development, education, public health, public safety, civic engagement, and of course equity. Our underconnected and unconnected residents have been at a major disadvantage this last year, and the digital divide has exacerbated some existing disparities. Next slide. I think less obvious, though, is the relationship to transportation for many people, but broadband is absolutely critical to transportation operations and our ability to fully benefit from technology solutions that can make the transportation system much more efficient and much more safe. We have a bold vision for the future of transportation at SANDAG, and that's going to rely on ubiquitous broadband. During the pandemic, we also saw how working from home and accessing services remotely can have a major impact on the transportation system by reducing congestion and making more trips virtual trips. And that in turn helps to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So there's definitely a benefit to getting more people to be able to telework. and access services remotely. And then broadband also provides all of our local jurisdictions with the infrastructure that they need to advance smart city initiatives that make their municipal operations more sustainable and more efficient. Next slide. So I think you're all familiar with what the digital divide looks like in our region, but it's really kind of a tale of two digital divides. We have the rural and urban digital divide. And then we also have the divide between those who can afford internet and have the ability and know how to use it and those who don't. So 23% of households earning less than $50,000 a year in our region don't have a broadband subscription, likely because they cannot afford it. We have up to 40% of students in many of our local districts that are underconnected or they don't have a device or any access to the internet at home at all. And then we have a much lower percentage of our rural population that has fixed broadband compared to urban areas. Next slide. Because of this, SANDAG is definitely taking a much more active role in addressing the digital divide. And there's various ways in which we're doing that. We have some fiber sharing agreements with both our transportation operators, Caltrans, MTS, and NCTD, but also we're working on fiber sharing agreements with the private sector, one in particular with Media 3, and where we'll be able to expand broadband service in the South Bay communities. We've also started recognizing broadband as a mobility strategy, and we are proactively integrating broadband into transportation plans, starting with our regional transportation plan, our new vision for transportation, and all of our corridor studies and work that we do. We also recently joined a coalition of organizations across Southern California to create a framework for streamlining broadband deployment. And a real focus of that group has been on developing draft broadband resolution and model policies for cities to consider adopting. And some of you may have listened in last Friday when our board of directors adopted a version of that resolution. Next slide, please. And then to build upon all of this work, we've established this task force. And this task force is really going to be responsible for developing a regional digital equity strategy and action plan. I appreciate Hassan reminding everyone here that we're here to work. You're all asked to participate because you're already doing great work in this space. There's a lot going on in our region, but we're discovering that it's very siloed. And sorry, my screen just went out. And that we would definitely benefit from regional coordination. We can make more out of our resources if we're working together on this. So in terms of the steps we're going to be taking to develop this strategy, first we are conducting research, collecting data on broadband gaps and best practices. This is probably the most important part of the study. We really need to understand the problem that we're solving for. Data availability is a real issue, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the later part of the presentation. We're then going to take all of that research findings and develop the strategy. And our commitment is to have the strategy developed by the summer of 2021. We need to go beyond strategy, though, and develop an actionable plan. And our plan is to have that plan to our board by the end of this year. So we have a lot of work to do over the course of 2021. Next slide, please. So the goal, I think, is pretty straightforward and simple. It's digital equity across the region. When we talk about digital equity, we're talking about both access, so expanding affordable broadband service everywhere where it doesn't exist today, and then increasing adoption, so ensuring that everyone can subscribe to and use the internet. Next slide. I want to just make sure that we all understand what the objectives are for the task force and the digital equity action plan. Of course, get your feedback if you feel like something's missing or something doesn't quite make sense. First and foremost, we want to foster collaboration to make the most out of all of the investments that are going into broadband expansion in the region. And I already talked about the importance of conducting research and collecting data to really understand where those broadband gaps exist. We are trying to develop a collective understanding about the need for digital equity across disciplines. This seems, kind of obvious and straightforward, but as I mentioned previously, I've gotten a lot of questions since SANDAG got involved in this, and I don't really understand the relationship of between the digital divide and regional planning work and transportation. So I think we really need to help people understand why the digital divide touches on so many areas of our lives. One of the key outcomes is going to be to develop policies, model policies, programs, and practices that will lead to rapid broadband deployment and increased adoption in the region. We understand that policies are currently a hurdle, so we want to understand what those barriers are, and we want to improve and have some consistency in the region. We then need to establish agreement on specific actions, and these aren't just actions for Sandag, but it's for all of us. So we'll be defining roles and responsibilities and developing a timeline for implementing that action plan. We then want to use that plan to bring funding and resources to the region. So we'll be seeking grant opportunities, strategic partnerships, and then, of course, we want to make sure that we're making progress on the plan, and we'll be responsible for evaluating, monitoring, and making sure that we don't need to, maybe pivot and change direction. So I just want to take a pause for a second and see if everyone agrees that these are the right objectives, and that this is what you signed up for and that you're ready to roll up your sleeves and be a part of this. So if I don't hear anything, I'm going to assume that that is a confirmation. Okay, and if you think of anything else, you can always add to the chat. All right, next slide, please, James. So we've broken down the research phase into 3 different areas. And in the next slides, I'll share our research questions under each of these focus areas for feedback and discussion. So for existing conditions and gaps, there really is no single data source that is adequate or granular enough. So at the end of the day, what we're really doing is cobbling together data from various sources to try to paint a complete picture of the digital divide in the region. Next, then we want to identify what are those challenges, what are the barriers that are preventing us from making progress, and what are the opportunities for overcoming those barriers. And then last, we're doing a national scan for best practices and lessons learned that can be applied to our region. If somebody else has cracked this nut, we don't need to waste our time coming up with new solutions. Or, if somebody has a lesson learned for something that didn't work well, we certainly don't want to go down that path in our region. Next slide. So our research questions under the existing questions are listed here on the slide. We first and foremost, we want to understand what core broadband infrastructure exists in the region and where. And we have reached out to all of our member agencies, and we've requested data on where they have municipal fiber. So our intent is to take all of that data and to develop a regional map of at least the municipal fiber network in the region. We also want to understand how jurisdictions are planning for broadband, how they're permitting, what the cost of permits are, what policies and practices do they have in place that either help or hinder broadband expansion. And we're conducting interviews between now and the first couple of weeks of February with planning directors and public works directors and others at local jurisdictions to get that information, which we'll bring back to this group next month. The next 3 bullets are really focused on broadband service availability, consumer choice, quality and cost of service. And I'll share a few maps with you in a minute that we've put together with data from the CPUC. But what you'll see is that data is somewhat misleading, and what we haven't been able to get our hands on, obviously, is cost information. The next question is focused on adoption. We have some census data from ACS data on household broadband access that we cross-tabulated with income, but the margin of error is pretty high at the census tract level. So the best we can really do is a regional summary and maybe community level summaries there. And then last, we're collecting information on existing programs and evaluating their effectiveness. And this is an area where many of you can help us inventory and assess these programs. Next slide, James. So I wanted to share a little bit of the data that we've been collecting. This map is just a map that shows where the concentrations of low-income households are in the region. So the darker the blue color means more low-income households in that particular community. So you'll see Southeast San Diego, the southern portion of the region, and then up kind of along the 78 corridor, higher concentrations of low-income households. Next slide. So this map shows the maximum advertised broadband speeds in the region, and the dark green areas are those areas that meet the state goal of 100 megabits per second. So back in August, the governor issued an executive order and established a goal for the state to have broadband speeds at 100 megabits per second across the state. So the green areas are the areas that have advertised speeds, broadband service companies that advertise speeds that would meet that 100 megabits per second threshold. The federal government, on the other hand, has a threshold of 25 megabits per second. And the lighter green are the areas that meet that federal threshold for broadband. And then the gray areas fall below the federal threshold. This does not necessarily mean, though, that these are the speeds that people are actually getting for internet, right? Just because you maybe subscribe for a service of 100 megabits per second or 150 megabits per second, I think many of us have experienced very slow internet due to network congestion during the pandemic. So that's why this map is a little bit misleading. I think it overestimates the speeds that people are getting for internet in the region. Next slide. This map is about consumer choice. So how many broadband providers exist within the region? And we're only showing the broadband providers that are capable of meeting that federal threshold of 25 megabits per second. Download speed, 3 megabits, upload speed. So you'll see that most of the region has access to about 2 providers, but with the exception of the eastern part of the region where we have 1. And then there are a few little pockets here and there that have 3 or 4 providers available. Next slide. This one is less important, but I guess interesting nonetheless. We're not so focused on technology. I think speed, its quality of service is more important. But this map shows the different broadband technology of transmission available across the region. So cable, VDSL, fiber, and fixed wireless service are the 4. So most of the region has, 2 or 3 types of technology, broadband technology available to them. But obviously out in our rural areas, again, there are far fewer options. Next slide. So the next research area is opportunities and challenges, and we're focused on understanding what federal and state initiatives can be leveraged for our efforts. What are those opportunities and challenges for government agencies to accelerate broadband infrastructure, whether it's through planning, whether it's through policies, whether it's through leveraging construction projects? What are the opportunities and challenges for successful public-private partnerships? And then what are the opportunities for incentivizing broadband expansion in underserved areas, so in our rural and low income communities? Next slide. And then last, for best practices, we want to look for model plans, policies, and permitting practices. What are some partnership models? What are broadband service models that work well in rural and tribal areas? What other innovative service models should we be looking at, including community-based and municipally sponsored broadbands? And then model programs across the country for increasing adoption and bringing down the cost for families that need that. So next slide, please. So with that, I want to open it up for discussion. I'm interested in hearing from all of you. Are we asking the right questions? Are we missing anything? Does your organization have data, or can you help us acquire the data that we need to be able to do this analysis? And how can we fill in any data gaps that exist? Is anyone planning to do surveys? And are there questions that we can get into your surveys to get more information that will help us out? Or are there other opportunities to work with you to collect the data that we need? So I'm going to take a pause here, and if you want to raise your hand to speak, I think that would be great, and we'll call on you. I see Caitlin's hand up. Caitlin, go ahead.
Hey, Antoinette, I just wanted to say that I think what you've already put together in such a short amount of time is incredible, and I'm so motivated and excited to get to work on this. But for whatever best practices you need, I'm happy to lead in pulling together a few different jurisdictional best practices so far And any data that you guys could use, if we have it on hand at EDC, I'm happy to obtain that and send it your way too. So yeah, that's it. We're very
Excellent.
excited.
Thank you, Caitlin. Barry, I see you with your hand up.
Yes. Gathering the data and the information is going to be important because what I'm specifically looking at is taking an inventory as to what kind of infrastructure do we have primarily in low income and rural areas, because that affects growth in the future. The reason why transportation is involved in this from my aspect is because of the new iOS system that's going to be required in a lot of futuristic, within the next 20 some years, transportation information, right? Transportation services. And if we don't have the infrastructure in place, and that's the same for rural communities. We all know that when development starts, that's the first thing that's done is digging up the roads, putting up the fiber to support all of the amenities that's coming with the upcoming development. Our communities, because they were older, was left out of that. And so I'm really looking at information to show what we don't have in our communities. And again, this is not only in the urban area, this is in the rural areas as well. Is that we will need some sort of accurate inventory of what we don't have to get started. I had mentioned earlier that SDG&E, in my humble opinion, is speaking volumes by not being at this meeting, because one of the continuous problems that a lot of, again, underserved communities have is, you guys, we still have poles over here. We still have lines of electricity and power that is not underground. So in partnering with these different entities, we can solve numerous things if we get on the same page. And where there's power issues, we can also use that timing to plan for any underground infrastructure that we will need. Does that make sense? Okay, that's all. It's my story and I'm sticking with it.
Thank you, Barry. We're definitely going to be reaching out to SDG&E, and we'll report back at our next meeting on the data that we've collected on at least municipal fiber investments. So we might not have the complete regional map done yet, but we'll have something to share with you and the rest of the group at that point in time. Carla, your hand was up next.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to note that this has been awesome, and I'm really excited to deep dive into a little bit more of that data specific to where, you know, you showcased a lot of low income that also correlates with a lot of our service area here in San Diego County. I think that one thing that's still missing is, you know, we talk about access, adoption, but really taking it further, right? There's still, to me and to our, you know, our company as a whole, a gap between is it really the cost, right? And how can we bridge that via cost? Obviously, we're a private entity, we're a business. And so even though we have specific programs, it's not a one size fits all. And so how can we enhance allowing, you know, funding that's coming from both the federal, the state, sometimes local entities, and working with private partners to really help bridge that for families who are not yet connected. And I think that that's something that's still maybe to be considered in this plan. That way we can, to Hassan and other points, like really make an impact in getting to those families. The second thing as well is I also think, you know, just being technology neutral is still something that we need to showcase. We need to, you know, and we'll take that on as well as a private partner, right? There's a lot of marketing around how fiber is the best way to do so, but there is ways to get through coaxial cables. We can get gig speeds as we do in a lot of our service areas. So showcasing that where that's also cost effective, that network is already there, but through, again, the exchange of a router that's outdated, you can get those services. And then, you know, as you noted, I appreciate how you showcase the definitions between federal and state, because I do think for a lot of partners, including Cox, we serve nationwide. And so to the extent that we can also align ourselves, you know, with SCAG and other service areas, et cetera, it'll just make it more efficient and better ways to deploy it quicker across all areas as well. So thank you again. And if we can also provide data, if there's specific things, please let us know as you continue to collect this information. So thank you.
Thanks, Carla. We'll be reaching out to do an interview. That's next step too. We're interviewing cities, but we also want to interview service providers. So appreciate your willingness to share information and data. Erin, you had your hand up next.
Yes, thank you. And hopefully I'm able to build off of actually what both Barry and Carla did speak to. So just first what Barry was talking about in really identifying and having full knowledge via data, particularly underinvested areas. I am definitely interested in that with regard to what you said, Antoinette, with regarding incentives. So how can we know that you know, it's been market forces that have been driving a lot of that underinvestment. And so what are the policy levers that are needed to counterbalance so that we can really incentivize the actual laying in the ground? I'm looking out the window. We have wires above our street too. I'm in City Heights, and, you know, but really like what are the incentives that we can put out to really lay that, you know, get the cable in, and so we can get wired connection more broadly, and what do those incentives look like, and how can we learn from other regions and what they're doing. At the Equitable Distance Learning Task Force, one of the data kind of gathering practices that we're getting ready for is re-engaging with our school districts. So hopefully that data can just also kind of, you know, complement and feed into any gaps. I will say that one of the things that we've noticed though too is that sometimes getting data from those larger kind of institutional bodies is not always what's actually happening on the ground. So also counterbalancing that with data that's being gathered. I do know that PK, the Parent Institute for Quality Education, I think it's going to be out today, just did it was statewide, but there's quite a bit of San Diego County data that we could probably get from them that shows really kind of what's the reality on the ground with the folks that they work with. And so we can kind of, you know, use those to triangulate, I guess, what's actually happening on the ground. And then I would just also say there are models like what's been done with Education Superhighway that was very focused on getting wired broadband connection into schools across the country. And so what can we learn from what they did, you know, in terms of data sharing agreements, in terms of, you know, really figuring out, you know, what does that infrastructure actually look like to get it out to rural schools, and how can some of those even potentially be used as hubs in the future. So just tapping into, you know, some of those nonprofits that are working on the federal level that have models that we can learn from. So, but all in all, I do think we're asking the right questions besides what Carla shared about where there are pieces maybe for cost sharing models or things like that. Like what can we explore there? That I think that was a great point to bring up. But other than that, it seems to be right on the money.
Thank you, Erin. And I appreciate all of the best practices that you've shared with us so far. It's been super helpful. Charlene, I'm so glad you were able to join us, and you have your hand up next. Do you want to just introduce yourself real quickly since we missed you at the beginning?
Yes, my name is Charlene Ornelas. I'm right now the Executive Director of the Blind Community Center of San Diego. I'm also a member of the California Council of the Blind. I have been doing ADA consulting, mostly volunteer. I have been paid for it at times, but since 1984, and a lot of it has been through transportation and the public right away. So I look at things as how they would affect people with a disability. And as I mentioned earlier, in my communications in the chats, that there's a group of people who are not going to ever possibly be able to access broadband. And as more broadband is the way to access information, find out what you need to do, like with with bus transportation stuff, and they'll be using transportation. We might need to look at having like a relay system. They can call in an easy number, keep it in their phone so they can just call it, and that number can then connect them to the broadband location that they would need to go to. And I'm talking about people who are seniors who really can't understand or pick up and learn the broadband and all the internet and its uses, and people with developmental and disabilities and like brain injuries or developmental delays. These are all people who, no matter what we do because of the brain damage or the delay or just because they don't have the knowledge, they're never going to be able to get onto it. Maybe some people with some of the Obama phones, their phones aren't as elaborate, so they can't get on them. So if we had like a relay where people could call a number and that number could somehow connect them to the where they need to go, or that would be helpful.
Really good points, Charlene. Thank you. Chris, you are next with your hand up. Chris Schmidt.
Yeah, hi guys. You know, when we did this statewide and had this conversation, one of the data sources that we looked towards was the California Utility Commission's data from various providers. And you've shown some of the high level materials. I think there's a greater depth that data is available. Now, one of the issues there, it's proprietary, and the providers are very concerned about who gets to see that. We did execute a data sharing agreement with the CPUC and Caltrans so that folks could look at that and do some analysis. And I think there could be some discussion as to how to do that appropriately within this sub-region, and perhaps get the providers on board with how to share that information appropriately so that staff could work towards identifying these gaps. Obviously, there's a major business issue here for all the providers, but I think it's important to talk about openly and honestly if we're serious about this. And the conversations that I've had with some of the utility partners, they are serious. And you know, part of that is to be more transparent. The conversations with CPUC have been more difficult. They are also under very limited ability to share that information statutorily and otherwise. So it would really be helpful if the providers stepped up and worked towards that. I just want to talk a little bit here about this point about polls and SDG&E. Just as a side note, when Caltrans has worked with both broadband providers on various installations around the state, you know, this comes up a lot because we're using shared infrastructure, especially in rural areas where you've got both electricity being conveyed as well as you know, communications technology on the same poles in the same corridors. And so a lot of the installations are not one entity using one set of poles and equipment, but it's shared. And so in our region, figuring out how to do a better job coordinating is absolutely critical. Caltrans has pledged to do that with SDG&E. We have a partnership going already. As many of you are hopefully aware, they are very busy hardening their infrastructure in the East County. That presents opportunities and significant challenges as they're replacing their own poles. Other entities' equipment is on those same poles, and we need to work towards addressing those kinds of challenges. And perhaps as part of that, there are opportunities to improve connectivity as we're upgrading the infrastructure in the first place. So I just want to mention those two opportunities, both CPUC and working with SDG&E. So thank you.
Chris, as always, you're full of wonderful ideas. Thank you so much. We definitely want to explore the opportunity to perhaps get more granular data from the CPUC. So we'll be in touch. Hector, you had your hand up next.
Yeah, thank you. So something I want to bring up, which I think is extremely important, is that when we plan this and kind of figure out what we want to do, I think we first have to start with what's already out there. And what I mean by that is, are we planning on building on what's already out there and expanding on that? Because that might have a limit to what we can do with it, depending on what's already out there. And number two is, are we starting from scratch and just gonna install a new system? Because what's out there now, 25 megabits, like that's what is federally required, right? That's and today that's slow. In 10 years, that's not going to do anything. It's kind of like a phone, right? At first, 8 gigabits, 16, that was a lot. Now, I mean, you can't even buy a phone with that kind of memory. So I think it's extremely important that we plan on what's going to be needed 10, 20 years from now, so we don't have to do this again. Right when we finish it, we're like, oh, that was a good job, we finished this, and then look back, oh wait, we have to redo it all over again because now these speeds aren't helpful. So knowing what's already out there, I don't know who can provide that information or how we can get it, and then deciding if we want to build on that or kind of say, hey, let's tear this out and start new. It might be more expensive, but it'll save a lot of money in the long run.
Thank you, Hector. Yeah, hopefully we'll be able to get a good picture of what infrastructure exists through this effort, and we've already started on that. And appreciate your comments. I have Danny's hand is raised next.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to ask, or actually propose, San Diego County has the census 2020, 760,000 children from the ages of 0 to 17. And I know we're talking about devices, we're talking about the infrastructure. The last piece I think is as substantial and very, very important, because I'm a girl dad of 2 girls, and it's filtering. It's filtering. So I wanted to put that out there as well, because when you take them anywhere, even to Legoland back in those days, I question, okay, what's the filtering behind that? And so that's a very, very important question. And I think a lot of parents, to take the stress away from them, is the filtering aspect. They want to know, is this safe for our kids to use? So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. David, you're next.
So I really appreciate that you have been able to pull together the providers, whether it's the wireless, the cable folks, as well as third-party providers like Crown Castle. I think that's going to be really crucial. And sort of ancillary to this process, I think we do have to also look at our regulatory environment for those cities that are here, and where there may be issues associated with the rapidness of deployment, so that we as cities can hopefully share some best practices around that to the other 15 cities that aren't on this. So I would just put that out there as part of this. In some cases, our regulatory structures are part of can be a challenge, and I recognize that. At the same time, if we're looking at upgrading infrastructure and increasing backhaul associated with any 5G deployments, that's an opportunity here that obviously we don't want to miss. So just adding that fun part into the discussion as well.
David, I think that's one of the most important things that we'll be able to accomplish with this project, is identifying what issues exist within the regulatory environment now, and then proposing solutions. So we'll be interviewing all of the cities and trying to understand what the landscape is, and we'll report back at our next meeting. Should be a really interesting discussion on what we've discovered in terms of permitting policies, proactive planning, if any, who is the point of contact within jurisdictions. So it will be a good discussion next month. Gary, you're next.
Well, Antoinette, thank you. I really appreciate all the comments coming in, and as organization has been working on this for a number of years, we've been looking at it from our standpoints, which are the equipment and the need for the technology. And then the other part was we touched around is the education, the training, just mentioned about filtering. So those are the 2 things that we've been able to address, and it continues to have great need and something that we're going to have to continue to focus on. But it's so good to hear about now approaching the 3rd thing, which we haven't been able to address, and that is the broadband access. And so as we move forward and we're focusing on broadband access, I don't want to forget the other 2 components.
Agreed, Gary. I think one of the areas that SANDAG and our member agencies can contribute a lot is the access piece, but we've brought the rest of you here because you're all working on adoption, digital literacy, and it's important that we're all working together. So It doesn't look like I have any other, oh, sorry, one other hand raised, Sal.
So I'm here listening to everybody. Everybody is coming, I think, from a good space on wanting to address a lot of these issues. One thing that I do want to lift up and that we do not lose sight in is we already have a huge crisis going on with individuals in pockets of our city that do not have adequate or any access to internet. I think that once we establish those communities that are south to north, east to west, we should have a priority for those communities that already are going through something that is unfathomable. I have 3 children that are full-time in my house in schools, ranging from elementary all the way up into college. My wife is a full-time teacher doing, as you know, working from home. And then you plot myself in here working from home as well. And I can't imagine not having adequate speed because, first of all, forget everybody's education. I don't get paid if I don't get on. So once we get into that space that there is a humanitarian crisis linked to this in some families that cannot connect. So my priority is, yes, equitable, build out, but my priority are those families in communities that do not have adequate access or even affordable access from, they don't have a choice. And, you know, we can talk about it all day long, low income, there's already out there. It's not enough because I got the highest speed and we still have trouble. And so we got to do everything when we sit down and we get into the space of plot, planning, and then implementation. And then, you know, we keep moving forward. I'm always going to highlight, and I don't know Brother Barry Pollard, but I'm always going to highlight that message. We need to lift up the forgotten communities. Thank you.
Absolutely, Sal. Thank you. Okay, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Amy. James, if you want to flip to the next slide to just talk a little bit about what's happening with the state and the broadband action plan for those of you who maybe haven't had the chance to dive into that. She'll give us a quick synopsis. So Amy.
All right. Hi, everybody. First of all, in August, Governor Newsom signed an executive order to bridge the digital divide by mobilizing across state government agencies. And the order directs agencies to pursue a goal of 100 megabits per second download speeds, and it requires the California Broadband Council to develop a California State Broadband Action Plan, which was completed this last month. The executive order also outlines actions across state agencies to accelerate mapping and data collection, identifying funding, and accelerating deployment and adoption of high-speed internet. Regarding transportation, the executive order directs the California State Transportation Agency and California Department of Transportation to work with the California Transportation Commission to identify and incorporate the installation of fiber conduit into all appropriate and feasible transportation projects along the strategic corridors. Proactively planning for and incorporating broadband into transportation projects leads to Dig Once project savings and efficiencies, as well as public-private partnership opportunities with internet service providers. Next slide. The Broadband for All Action Plan establishes 3 goals as a framework for how to approach this issue. 1, all Californians have high-performance broadband available at home, schools, libraries, and businesses. The steps to accomplish this include modernizing broadband speed and performance standards, simplifying development and permitting processes by implementing Dig Smart policies, setting reliability standards and identifying shortcomings in network resilience and reliability, and establishing clear standards of consumer protection to minimize total customer bill impacts. At the state level, there will be criteria developed for state funding around demonstrated local and tribal government involvement that aligns with criteria for federal broadband funding, specifically the Department of Agriculture's Reconnect and Community Connect programs. This will enable California to remain competitive in accessing federal funding. The report also identified a few potential sources of funding for these efforts, which sounds like many of us here are already familiar with. But the Department of Agriculture's Reconnect and Community Connect program, the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund through the FCC, the California Advanced Services Fund, and the California Emerging Technology Fund. The second goal is all Californians have access to affordable broadband and the devices necessary to access the internet. The steps outlined addressing this goal are: increase access to affordable broadband services and devices by developing a framework to define essential broadband service affordability standards, provide a comprehensive assessment of households' ability to afford essential broadband service, improve the California Lifeline program, and leverage existing grant programs in order to provide free broadband service for tenants in newly built housing, promote affordable services and devices by targeting information campaigns at existing programs, and provide communities with tools on how to promote service provider competition. The third goal is all Californians can access training and support to enable digital inclusion. And broadly, the steps necessary to accomplish this include strengthening cross-sector and intra-agency partnerships to create digital literacy tools and programming. There are also several actions that will support every step outlined above. Importantly, improving broadband data and mapping transparency and usability by collecting more granular and more accurate broadband data and leveraging this information to build out the public California Interactive Broadband Map. The CPUC will also identify additional opportunities to provide technical assistance to local governments and other entities to best leverage local, state, federal, and private funding opportunities. And this may include supporting the creation of special districts or cooperatives to deploy networks. Next slide. So just to summarize, the key actions that will be taken at the state level include modernizing broadband speed and performance standards, evaluating data at serviceable location level to bring greater accuracy and granularity, implementing a Dig Smart policy for state-funded transportation projects, and developing a framework to define essential broadband affordability standards. At the local level, refining our available data will better prepare us to demonstrate our qualifications for state and federal funding. Additionally, local and tribal support was listed as a criteria for some federal and state funding opportunities. Next slide. And
Robin and Lori are up for the broadband legislative update, please.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Robin Wapner. I'm with our SANDAG Government Relations team, and Lori Grover is also here today. I'll be focusing on what's going on legislatively at the state level, and Lori will give a very brief update on what's going on at the federal level. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for having us here today. We've learned so much already. As Antoinette said earlier, this is a relatively new space for SANDAG to be filling, and so we are doing everything we can to get up to speed on how we can best inform and support digital divide and broadband access efforts in Sacramento and Washington, D.C. So Amy just gave a really great summary of what's going on the executive side in Sacramento. Legislatively, I'll say what we're seeing is really a reflection of a lot that we've talked about today. Widespread acknowledgement that there's a problem, growing momentum that we need to do something about it. And so we're really hopeful and optimistic that this year we'll see some actionable results. I'll say last year in 2020, 34 states actually enacted legislation or resolutions that had to do with improving broadband access. In California, there were a handful of bills that were introduced in 2020, with 1 or 2 of those actually getting signed into law. And in 2021, we've already seen 2 handfuls of bills be introduced, but I expect that we'll see some more. The bill introduction deadline for the 2021 legislative session is February 19th. So we'll keep our eyes out to see what else pops up in the next few weeks. So far, there are a few bills that we're watching closely, and I'm sure you are too. AB 14 and SB 4, both of those have to do with the California Advanced Services Fund, which is the fund that the Public Utilities Commission oversees to help support broadband access investments in our communities. We're also watching AB 34, which would actually place a general obligation bond measure on the 2022 ballot for It's called the Broadband for All Act of 2022. And then AB 41 has also been introduced by Assemblymember Wood. And this one actually has to do with the Dig Once policy. So something that's definitely related to the transportation infrastructure side of the digital divide conversation. As the group's been talking about today, digital divide really touches so many aspects of our communities and our lives. So a large portion of what we're going to be doing as part of our legislative advocacy efforts is really helping to educate and answer the question that Antoinette went over earlier today. Why is SANDAG involved in this, and how does this connect to transportation? And so we're really going to be doubling down on the importance of connectivity and access to jobs, opportunities, education, and why it's so important for SANDAG to be involved in this conversation, and hopefully help to inform some of the bills that hopefully move forward this year. So we will be proposing that we include support for increased broadband access in our 2021 legislative program that would be going to our board of directors next month. We're also closely watching some of the rulemakings that are taking place at the Public Utilities Commission, and would encourage others to get involved. If you're participating, please let us know so that we can collaborate and coordinate on those. We're obviously working very closely with the California Emerging Technology Fund and hoping to learn from them. Like Antoinette said, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So we want to learn from you all and hopefully help leverage and maximize efforts that you've already been making in all of this space. In addition to the rulemakings, we're of course just going to be working to pursue funding through any and every way that we can, whether it's through the state budget, the PUC, or other legislative measures, which is probably a good segue over to Lori to talk about what's going on in DC.
Thank you, Robin. Yeah, just as Robin noted, this is kind of a new issue, somewhat new for us. So we're really excited to learn from this group as the task force moves forward. As Hassan noted in his opening remarks, the COVID-19 pandemic has forced jobs, classrooms, businesses to go remote, which has shone a light on the disparities in internet connectivity, and with it, access to digital learning, telehealth, and public and residential broadband services. So as such, over the past year, and with the introduction of several recovery and relief packages, I've been tracking federal assistance for things like telehealth, telework, remote learning assistance, including the nearly $7 billion that was approved for the HR 133 for which is the latest COVID-19 recovery package for broadband access for students, families, and unemployed workers, rural communities, and telehealth. Of that total, about $1 billion was for grants for tribal broadband programs. Over the past couple of months, SANDAG has been coordinating with NARC, one of our partners that we're so lucky to have on this task force, and is a wonderful resource for our team, this team, and a great consensus builders among metropolitan planning organizations. So SANDAG has been coordinating with them to understand the opportunities we have in front of us and working to bridge this digital divide. In fact, later, next week, we will be presenting at the NARC Conference of Region on the work that we have been doing for the agency related to broadband. So a little plug for their conference going into next week. Seeing as this is, I just lost my notes, I'm sorry. Seeing as this is the first meeting of the task force, I can tell you that I'm interested and super excited to learn from this group and to understand the implications of the digital divide from a mobility and equity standpoint, especially as we talk with our delegation out in DC. And with that, just like to say thank you. Thank you so much for having us, and looking forward to working with this great group. That's it.
And then quickly, Sanjeev, if you want to just say a couple of words on the FCC funding, please.
Yeah, please move
next slide, James.
Quickly. So the FCC has been focused on this for a decade or longer, but most recently in 2020, there was the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, which was a reverse auction, which we can discuss at some later point. In any case, in the December 7th, the final bidding, the 180 bidders who won $9.2 billion from the FCC, from the federal government, to provide broadband in underserved census tracts around the country. And there are several local consortiums, and as well as Cox Communication, that won some bids to provide broadband in our county. There's like several definitions of tiers. The highest being gigabit low latency tier, and then down to 100 megabits download, 10 megabits upload speed, and then that's called above baseline. The baseline is 50/5, and then the minimum is 25/3. So the FCC has already started moving up to defining broadband as gigabit download speed and a 100 megabit, and a 10-year rollout of these winning bidders is planned for the underserved census tracts. And the next two slides, next slide, please. This is captured from the FCC website about the RDOF, the Opportunity Fund, and this shows that that each of these census tracts has at least one bidder who has won to provide this gigabit capability rollout over 10 years, and basically they have to build it out within 6 years. So that's sort of. And then I wanted to just focus in, the next slide, please, shows just focusing in on some areas where the winning bidders are for lower than, so above baseline, which is 100/10 megabits per second. So anyway, we have to pursue more of this, but this is some early research about what is being done with federal dollars. So thank you.
Thank you, Sanjeev. It's really exciting that there's going to be some more resources coming into the region for broadband. James, next slide, please, which is our last slide. So in terms of next steps, we're intending to meet again on February 25th. If this is not a great time for people, I'd appreciate you plugging in the chat a better time of day for you. I mentioned we've got the interview with local jurisdictions underway. We're collecting the data on fiber deployments in the region. And we're also going to be asking broadband providers to participate in interviews and share their experience with us. So we'll be doing that over the course of the next few weeks, and we'll share that with this group on February 25th. The other thing that we'll be doing on February 25th is presenting some draft guiding principles for the regional digital equity strategy. And so if you would also, if you have thoughts, I would love it if you would type into the chat any keywords, phrases, or themes that you'd like to see be part of the guiding principles. So examples would be something like align and integrate, right? So we're trying to link digital equity work to different disciplines and strategic areas. So maybe that is a guiding principle for the work that we do. But please plug in a few thoughts into the chat before we sign off for the day. Any final thoughts, words that anybody wants to share before we jump off and close the meeting? Well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate your time today. Looking forward to working with this group. We'll be, in touch between now and the next meeting via email, and look forward to seeing you in a month. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, all.
Antoinette, will you be sending a copy of the?
Yep. Well, the meeting's recorded, so we'll send out a recording of the meeting, and then we'll also have notes that we'll be sending out, kind of a high-level summary. So the chat will definitely be summarizing. There's a lot of great feedback in the chat today, so we'll definitely be sharing and summarizing that.
Outstanding. That's really good. Thank you for your help. Thank you for your work, and we look forward for everything going forward.
You bet, Sal. Thank you.
Easy.
I think we can close the meeting, James. Thank you.
Okay, definitely.